Okay, peace and shalom, family. Peace and shalom. What's going on? It's your brother DivineProspect of Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, and we have an exclusive special presentation for you on this evening. Thank you for those of you who are here, fortunate enough to catch this live stream. This is actually a pop-up live stream. Me and the brother, we discussed it for some time now, but we kept messing each other as far as like schedule and stuff, and he's an hour behind, etc. So, but fortunately enough, we was able to set aside this time slot on this evening to give you guys a special presentation. All right. Before I begin with the special presentation, I do want to share something with y'all on the screen real quick. All right. Just so you guys are aware. Share this and then you're going to get him up and running. All right. So this is the channel disclaimer, right? Views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers, in this case, the speaker. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect nor represent the channel's policy or views held by this channel or broadcaster. Doesn't mean that what he's saying is contradictory to what we teach over here. It's just that this is the brother's presentation. I'm giving an opportunity to do that. He'll introduce himself to y'all shortly before he begins his presentation. The broadcaster, host, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program. All right. So typically when I have a guest speaker, I like to put a disclaimer out there so that those who are watching understand that whatever's being voiced is that of the speaker themselves and does not necessarily reflect the views held by me, KHM, or this channel. All right. All right. So with that out the way, I have my brother, the Hebrew of Israel, aka Ivri, in the building. Me and his brother has been talking for some time now. He's been showing me a lot of information that he has in regards to genetics and in the realm of anthropology as it pertains to the Proto-Afro-Asiatic line or lineage on the way down. Me and him have a joint presentation coming up very soon where I'll be presenting my information on primary sources, migration routes, customs, mannerisms, culture of the Black Jews, aka Israelites, who existed in sub-Saharan West and Central Africa. And that presentation should be coming soon, sometime this fall. All right. But in the interim, I'm allowed his brother, he's going to do 2 presentations leading up until that main presentation that we're able to do. And this is the first of many. All right. Now, this brother has presented on other channels previous on Genesis 49ers. He's done the similar presentation on there. So anything you may miss here, go back and check out his presentation on that channel as well. You'll see some more information if you're interested. All right. All right. So without further ado, thank you for watching. Again, this hasn't even been really advertised. The next one will, based on the consensus of reception for this particular broadcast. If you guys are liking it now and liking it on a replay, then we'll go ahead and advertise the next one. And then when me and him do our presentation, that will also be heavily advertised. All right. Let me give a couple of shout outs for those who are awake at 12:46 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Over here, I'm over here in Atlanta, Georgia. And maybe different times for y'all. I know for the Hebrew of Israel, it's 11:46 a.m. for him. He's located in Texas. And I also see some people in the building who are all the way in Cali, right? Lucky for y'all in Cali. It's like 9:46 at night for y'all. Shout out to my brother Bruce Smith in the building, and Andrea Gilbert, Jaslyn Berry, Azariel, Jimmy Johnson, Terrace Bridges, Do It for the Nation, Asantawa, Shari, Anaya, etc. Those are the only people I see that are saying anything in the chat at the moment. If you want a shout out, hit 1. Shout out to Gartrell McKinney in the building. Hit 1 if you want a shout out. Give you a shout out. Also, to those of you, we are working diligently to complete out the rest of the COVID vaccine religious exemption letters for employment, right? And or for your employers. We're working on finish those up. I'm gonna try to complete some more tonight and try to get all of them done by tomorrow. So those of you can have them beginning this week. I know there's some deadlines set up for the 8th, which I think is by Friday. You need to have something in by Friday. So it will be completed, y'all willing, by Monday. All of them, we got tons of requests that came in. So we were trying to address them in the order in which we received them. So if you guys are still waiting on a letter, we're completing them for you. Also, you can also schedule some time to chat. In the description below, which will show up after the end of this session, will be the link you can click on to schedule an appointment for us to chat and talk. Sometimes we may even request you do that, depending on the nature of your circumstance at your job, right? Some of them are cut and dry. Here you go. Some of them we have to actually speak with you, right? So just stay tuned for that, all right? And thank you for supporting Kingdom Harbinger Ministries and allowing us to assist and help you. Like I said, we've helped several families already. The breadwinner of the home maintain their employment in the midst of this COVID-19 mandate. So we're going to continue to do what we can do to fight for the people in our community, so that way they may keep their job. All right. Now, if you're interested, I see VI Jones is asking for a letter. If you're interested in receiving a letter, I'm going to drop the link in the description box. Well, it'll be in the description box, but you can also click in the chat. I'm going to drop it in the chat real quick. And then from there, we're going to transition into getting started. See if I can cover a couple more shout outs before we get started. Also, let me know also in the chat if there's any audio or video quality issues. Let me know in the chat if there's any audio or video quality issues so we can address them. Let me drop it here. All right, there's the link right there. So you can click that link to get the process going to get that COVID-19 vaccine religious exemption form, all right? And also, those of you who may not have received a mandate at your job, it's good to be on top of this as well in the event that you may need it, because you never know what may happen in regards to executive orders. If your particular job gets federal funding or other things that may occur that may force the hand of your employer to mandate these licensed vaccines. All right. So we're trying to get you ahead of the curve as well. So again, you can click on that link, get the process started, or you can click on the link in the description that will be up here after the video is over. So you can schedule an appointment to chat with us if you want to speak with us about it as well. All right. So again, we love you, family. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. So we are going to get started. So without further ado, I want to present my brother, the Hebrew of Israel, aka Ivri, and his presentation on the origins of the Proto-Afro-Asiatic. The floor is yours, King.
All right, shalom, everyone, shalom. Some of y'all are familiar with me, but if you're not, you're about to be. So today we're going to break down the origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatics. So we'll go into why this is important. So we're going to begin from Shem to Israel. This is part 1. So in order to know who the ancient Hebrews of Israel are, we must understand who are their ancestors. According to the scriptures, the Israelites' ancestors are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But who was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Who were their ancestors before them? They go all the way back to a man named Shem. This is according to their genealogy, their scriptures. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 through 26, it reads, "This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters." And then from verse 10 to verse 26, it says, Arphaxad, then Shelah, then Eber, then Peleg, then Ru, then Serg, Nahor. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abraham, who of course is the ancestor of the Israelites. But who are all these guys, and who is Shem? As we can see, when we're dealing with this lineage, it goes all the way back to Shem. This is very important. The Israelites are a Semitic people because they biblically descend from this character named Shem. And we know this even when it comes to outside sources. The Israelites were a confederation of Iron Age Semitic-speaking tribes of the ancient Near East. Hebrew people are mostly taken as a synonymous with the Semitic-speaking Israelites. Historically, Israelites spoke a Semitic language called Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew script is the name used by modern scholars to describe the script found in Canaan inscriptions from the region of biblical Israel and Judea. Proto-Sinaitic, also known as North Semitic alphabet, is considered the earliest trace of alphabet writing and the common ancestor of both ancient South Arabian script and the Phoenician alphabet, which led to many modern alphabets, including the Greek alphabet. And here's just sort of a representation of that with the Paleo-Hebrew, the Phoenician alphabet, and the Proto-Sinaitic. And here is what it would have looked like. And here is Proto-Sinaitic in itself. And if you look at a language map or a language tree dealing with Paleo-Hebrew, it goes all the way back from Paleo-Hebrew to Northwest Semitic to Central Semitic to West Semitic to Proto-Semitic. Israelites are ethnically a Semitic people because they descend from Shem. Israelites are also linguistically Semitic because they descend from Shem. The ancestors of the Israelites are Semites. I'm trying to drill this in. This is very important. One important factor about the Semitic language is that it's part of the Afro-Asiatic language family. So, of relating to or being a family of languages widely distributed over Southwestern Asia and Africa, including Semitic, and Semitic of relating to or consisting of subfamily of the Afro-Asiatic language family that includes Hebrew. The Afro-Asiatic languages, also called Afro-San languages, formerly Hemito-Semitic or Semito-Hamitic languages of common origin, found in northern part of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and some islands and adjacent areas in Western Asia. And here is a map of the Afro-Asiatic languages. It's seen from the Middle East, from as far east of the Middle East as Iraq to as far west of Africa as Mauritania, and as far south of Africa as Ethiopia, and as far north of Africa as Tunisia. So, with that being said, the Israelites are an Afro-Asiatic Semitic people. Therefore, we should look into the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. First, we will take an academic approach to the birth of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. Then we'll take a biblical approach. But since we're taking an academic approach first, we'll dive into the genetics when it comes to haplogroups and things of that nature. So, what is a haplogroup? A haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or maternal line. Particular haplogroups are associated with well-known ancestral groups such as the Vikings, Australian Aboriginals, and the Celts. Mitochondrial haplogroups from the mother are determined by assessing mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. This also means that you will have the same mitochondrial haplogroup as everyone else in your direct maternal line. Your mother, brother, sister, aunt, and grandmother on her mother's side follow that haplogroup back to its origins, and you'll find a single mutation occurred at some point in history. So to simplify that, mitochondrial haplogroups is passed down from mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter, but also the son can have the maternal haplogroup as well. So paternal haplogroups. The paternal haplogroup relates to your Y chromosome, and since that is the sex determining chromosome for men, it is passed down from father to son. As women don't have a Y chromosome, they will not have a paternal haplogroup by default. However, they are able to find what their paternal haplogroup is if a male relative from the father's side, ideally a brother, father, uncle, or grandfather, is also tested. So just to simplify that, paternal haplogroups are passed down from father to son, but the daughter would not have it because women don't have an X and Y chromosome. So if a female wants to test her male relative's haplogroup, she'll have to go to like a brother or uncle or her father, just to simplify all that. To conclude, a haplogroup can trace your ancestry. The male, again, is called Y DNA or paternal haplogroup. And for the female, again, it's called MT DNA or maternal haplogroup. And men, like I just said, can carry both the paternal and the maternal, and women only carry the maternal. And so a haplogroup is a genetic population of people who share a common ancestor on the paternal or the maternal line. And so here's like a visual representation of that. This is you, and you get it from your father and your mother if you're like, a male. But if you're a female, you will only have your mothers and you won't have your fathers. Here's another representation, a slightly better one. So as you can see in blue, this is the father, and then the son carries, the blue. This is the mother in red. The son will carry both the red and the blue, because he's getting both the paternal and the maternal, whereas the sister or the daughter of these two will only carry the maternal. It's just a visual representation. All right. Also, haplogroups can be used to trace migrations, common descent, and ethnic groups. At its essence, a haplogroup is an ancestral clan. Some clans are the Vikings, Native Americans, all tribes, Celts, Aboriginal Australians, and other such groups. Your haplogroup tells you where your ancestors come from deep back in time. There are also male and female haplogroups, so you can see where your male and female sides. So you can see where your male and female sides of your family originated back in prehistoric times. As with Y DNA, which traces the male line from father to son, and MT, which traces the female line from mother to daughter. Haplogroups follow strict male and female descendancy lines. And so here's just a good map showing all the haplogroups around the world. Every Homo sapien, every human has a haplogroup. So linguists and geneticists commonly use haplogroups to find the genetic and linguistic origins and migrations of ancient ethnic groups. This is why it's important to know about haplogroups when studying the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. With that being said, let's begin. What are the genetic, linguistic, and ethnic origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic people? One of the theories for the origins of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is the Horn of Africa. Linlow Brend of 1997 proposed a scenario upon the linguistic grounds wherein Semitic languages originated in Ethiopia and crossed the Red Sea. So according to Leon Lee Bender, he's basically saying that Semites could have actually came from Ethiopia, which is quite interesting. So let's go a little bit deeper into that. This paper deals with the aspect of migration and even genetics. So it says this extensive, well-grounded linguistic research places the Afro-Asiatic homeland in southeastern Sahara or adjacent Horn of Africa. Denenkov does revise his common Semitic homeland, moving it from solely within Northeast Africa to areas straddling the Delta and Sinai, but comes to place the other 5 branches origins wholly in Africa. Archaeological data suggests a pre-food producing population movement from Africa into the Levant, consistent with the linguistic arguments for a pre-Neolithic migration of pre-Proto-Semitic speakers out of Africa via Sinai. A critical reading of the data in genetic analysis, specifically those of Y chromosome phylogeography and the TAQI49AF haplotypes, supports the hypothesis of populations moving from the Horn or Southeast Sahara northwards to the Nile Valley, Northwest Africa, the Levant, and Aegean. The geography of the M35/215 lineage, which is of Horn/East African origin, is largely coordinated with the range of Afro-Asiatic. So basically, he's saying that these early Afro-Asiatics, including Semites, likely would have came out of Africa from the Horn of Africa, carrying E markers. So here's a paper that deals with it as well. This is the title: Why Haplogroups, Archaeological Cultures, and Language Families. A review of the possibility of multidisciplinary comparisons using the case of E-M35 by Andrew Lanksker. So, scenario 1, as it says up here. Using Ehret's scenario, E-M35 and Afro-Asiatic must have been together from their first dispersal out of the general area of the Horn of Africa. A large number of E-M35 lineages came north to Egypt, which kind of shows right here, which is where E-M78, for example, is thought to have came into existence. E-M123, for example, is a clade of E-M35, which probably originated in the southern Levant, just to the northeast of Egypt. So that'll be right here where you see North Semitic. Many branches of E-M78 from nearby northern Egypt are also present in the Semitic-speaking populations of this region. And so basically, what they're saying is Afro-Asiatic, like I just said, would have been coming from the Horn of Africa, going up into Egypt and going through Sinai into the Middle East, going to specifically the Levant. And they would have carried E markers. So scenario 3, basically, as a final scenario, we compare the genetic evidence to a synthesis intended to represent the possibility that Afro-Asiatic and Semitic are younger than they are in the well-known proposals of Ehret and Mitolvi. If the starting point of Afro-Asiatic would be anywhere within the corridor stretching from the Nile Delta to the Horn of Africa, and if its dispersal started well into the Heliocene, more recently than in the scenarios of Ehret and Mitolvi, then E-M35 is also certain to have been present in that of Proto-Afro-Asiatic populations, while E-M123 has the presence of being a subclade of E-M35 that may have originated in the Levant quite early. It is basically true that E-M35 diversity found in the Levant today is a branch of the same diversity found in Egypt, which also has a high E-M123 diversity. This would make Afro-Asiatic and probably also E-M35 both representatives of the African contribution to the full development of the Neolithic, but not necessarily playing any special early role in the pre-Neolithic. So basically, one of the theories for the origins of Afro-Asiatic and Semites is that they came from the Horn of Africa and they would have carried haplogroup E. Now, here is just a visual representation of that. We have the Afro-Asiatic homeland and the root of Proto-Semites over here, to the left of the screen, and to the right of the screen, we have the migration of one interpretation for the migration of E, which would have been in the Horn of Africa, going up into Egypt, like the paper said, and then it would disperse going into the Middle East, North Africa, and even into Europe. And so here, just showing that representation of that. And then here's another just visual representation of that. Basically, Semites could have a African origin, specifically a Horn African origin, which is quite interesting. And they would have been E markers. And here's just another visual representation of that. Here's number 1 being Proto-Afro-Asiatic, the number 2, 3, 4, 5, then 6, then you have 7, and then you have 8. 8 being Proto-Semitic. And where does it all lead back to? All leads back to the Horn of Africa. And then here is just another visual representation of haplogroup E today and sort of anciently, because we have a lot of E in the Levant or in the Middle East, Southern Arabia, Eastern Africa, Northeast Africa, Northwest Africa, and in the center part of the Sahara, and also in the Mediterranean. So, how would these Afro-Asiatics and Semites look? Since we're dealing with ancient populations, these early Proto-Afro-Asiatics and pre-Proto-Semites would have looked Proto-Ethiopid if they were coming from the Horn of Africa. So this is the Proto-Ethiopid phenotype. I'm going to read the description. It says, ancient type that inhabited the southwestern Eritrean lowlands prior to the arrival of Ethiopians and possibly resembles early out of Africa types, as was still common from Kenya to Sudan, during historic times. So basically, the physical type of these people is dark, sometimes medium brown skin, and kinky curly hair, dolichocephalic with robust, bony, and elongated facial features. Pronathenism is relatively pronounced. And here's the region, basically in the region of where early Afro-Asiatics and Proto-Semites would have came from. And here's just another type, the Omotic type, which could be another good representation since we are dealing with, the Neolithic time period. It says probably a relic of pre-Neolithic periods. If you remember from my reading earlier, we talked about the pre-Neolithic. And it says dark brown skin and kinky curly hair, usually dolichocephalic, mild. This means a white nose. The period Ryan, a white nose. The lips are full and cheekbones often prominent. Ultimately, these early Afro-Asiatics and Semites would have looked Ethiopian or African if their origins truly are from the Horn of Africa. So the ancestors of the Israelites could have emerged from the Horn of Africa, where early Afro-Asiatics and Semitic populations migrated from. Genotype-wise, they would have carried Y DNA haplogroup E. Phenotype-wise, they would have been Proto-Ethiopic. And here's all the information just put together to show that. We have a linguist talking about Semitic coming from the Horn of Africa. We have the phenotype. We have the migration map, and we have the DNA migration map. So another theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is Yemen. So let's look at the Yemenite or the Yemeni origins of Afro-Asiatic. So here's a good map showing that, how Semitic would have been in the area of modern day Yemen. And here's a section from Peter Solomon Colvis. Here's all his credentials, who actually talks about this. He says, my theory is that when the Proto-Semitic languages left the Afro-Asiatic homeland of Northeast Africa, not just one lineage left, but a group of Proto-Semitic people from this region that included all the Y DNA haplogroups then present in Northeast Africa. It is possible that Northwest Semitic Hebrew people and languages dispersed into the Levant from Northeast Africa's now region around 5000 BCE. Thus, the earliest out of Africa settlement of Proto-Semitic people was likely in Yemen, on the southeastern region of the Arabian Peninsula. They then spread to the east and northeast to enter Mesopotamia and found the Semitic kingdom of Akkad in the Akkadian Empire. In this group, many of us conclude that haplogroup E is one of the major founding lineages of Semitic people, and that haplogroup E people were the ones who brought Proto-Semitic language out of the Afro-Asiatic homeland in Northeast Africa into the Levant and Mesopotamia. So basically saying that E would have been or that early Semites would have had haplogroup E, bringing it from Yemen into the Levant and from Northeast Africa as well. And so again, we're met with the idea of haplogroup E being the founding lineage of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic people. But if Yemen was the birthplace of Afro-Asiatics and Semites, then what would these Afro-Asiatic and Semites look like? So here's a good book dealing with the ancient inhabitants of the southern Arabia, which is where Yemen is located. It says the people of Arabia belong to two distinct and apparently quite different races. The Arabs of southern Arabia are largely dark, coarser features, and nearly beardless. All authorities agree that the southern Arabians are nearly related by origin to the Abyssinians. So who are Abyssinians? Since they're saying that southern Arabians look like these guys. So Abyssinians, also known as Habasha people, by the way, they are a Semitic speaking peoples mainly found in the highlands of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Some within diasporic communities have adopted the term to refer to all people of Eritrean or Ethiopian origin. So when they're saying that these southern Arabians look like Abyssinians, basically they're saying that they look like Ethiopians and Eritrean people. So, this is the phenotype of southern Arabians way back in the day. Here's another book dealing with the racial types of South Arabia. It says, racial affinities of the South Arabia lie in Northeast Africa. A Negroid strain occurred in the belt from Africa through South Arabia and Malaysia, including the Dravidians of southern India. So this guy is saying that a lot of these South Arabians kind of look like either Northeast Africans or that they sort of look like Dravidians of South India. Ancient Yemeni seem to have phenotypically looked African or Dravidian. Specifically, they would have looked Northeast African. So here is a good representation of the Arabian Vidoid type, ancient Vidid type of the Arabian Peninsula, found in Metri of South Oman, around the Hadranite in Yemen. This type could be linked to the ancestral Arabian population, as well as the Dravidians of India, which is what they just said. Dark brown skinned, curly, ringlet, black hair. So this is kind of what Proto-Semites and Proto-Afro-Asiatics could look like as well. This is another good example. Even in the 1930s to present day, people of Yemen are still quite dark skinned. Here are old photos of people in Yemen from 1930s taken with a traveler. And here are modern day Yemen people, still quite dark skinned. And again, these are just good representations of what early Semites could have looked like, as well as early Afro-Asiatics. This means if we were to go back long time ago, before the 1930s, or even when it comes to the ancient Yemeni, if we were to go back to the birth of Afro-Asiatic people in Yemen, then logically, they're going to be dark skinned, they're going to be African looking if we were to go back to like the Neolithic time period. So the early Afro-Asiatic Semitic ancestors of the Israelites could have emerged from Yemen. Therefore, their genotype likely would have been haplogroup E, and their phenotype likely would have been Northeast African, Dravidian, or just ancient Yemeni type. Here's just a visual representation of everything that I just covered: the DNA, how the people would have looked, and a map dealing with the migration. So another theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is the Arabian Peninsula. So the Winkler-Sestani theory, named after its two most distinguished prominents, Hugo Winkler and Leon Catani, claims that Arabia was originally a land of great fertility and the first home of the Semitic peoples. Through the millennia, it was undergoing a progress of steadily desertification or desertion of a drying up of wealth and waterways and spread of the desert at the expanse of the cultivatable land. The declining projected projectivity of the peninsula, together with the increase in the number of inhabitants, led to a series of crises of overpopulation and consistently to a reoccurring cycle of invasions of the neighboring countries by the Semitic peoples of the peninsula. Basically, Semites could have first popped up in the Arabian Peninsula. So, what's interesting about the Arabian Peninsula origin of Semites is that so far from what we've been hearing is that Semites would have had the E marker according to the Horn African origin and the Yemeni origin. Now, what's interesting about that is that we actually do find a lot of old samples of haplogroup E in the Arabian Peninsula. So lately, when it comes to 23andMe, they actually talk about how E came from or really cultivated itself in the Arabian Peninsula. So it says, and this is again from 23andMe, it says, it's possible that men carrying the DE haplogroup journeyed from Africa across the Red Sea and into the Arabian Peninsula. But it is also possible that DE originated within the Arabian Peninsula itself and later spread back to Africa. Here's a paper dealing with this called Saudi Arabia, Y Chromosome Diversity and its Relationship with Nearby Regions. It says geographical distribution of these sub-Saharan African lineages in the Arabian Peninsula seems to indicate a prehistoric entrance of a noticeably portion of these lineages that participated in the building of the primitive Arabian population. The presence of two undrived E-M96 Saudi lineages raises interesting questions related to the microhaplogroup DE-YAP phylogeography. Regions near but external to Northeast Africa, like the Levant or South Arabian Peninsula, could have served as an incubator for the early diversification of non-African unparental haplogroup varieties like Y chromosome DE-YAP. This model would imply that both CF-P143 and the DE-YAP evolved nearby but outside Africa. One DE-YAP ancestor would have spread to Asia and evolved to haplogroup D, while another DE-YAP returned to Northeast Africa and evolved into E. So basically, DE would have evolved in Arabia and would have back migrated, basically a back to Africa migration. Here's another study dealing with that called Carriers of Mitochondrial DNA Microhaplogroup L3 Basal Lineages migrated back to Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. And so it says the split of the Y chromosome posit DE haplogroup is very similar to the age of mtDNA L3. And Eurasian origin and back migration to Africa has been proposed for the African Y chromosome haplogroup E. This correlation rather seems to be the result of a joint and global replacement of the old autochthonous male and female African lineages by the new Eurasian incomers. So basically what they're saying is that haplogroup E would have been a Eurasian haplogroup and would have migrated into Africa, destroying or wiping out or pushing a lot of the autochthonous or native African populations, which would have been A and B markers. Cover that another time though. Still following the study, it says curiously ancestral E star, and that star means ancestral E, a very old form of E. So curiously, ancestral E star lineages have been detected in the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant. And of course, this is very interesting because we're basically seeing that with E being ancestrally in the Arabian Peninsula, this is also where some people posit that Semites originated from, Arabian Peninsula. So biologically, some believe that Semites come from Arabia, and they would have been like a brown Mediterranean people, also known as your African. We're getting to phenotype at the moment. Most folks think that, well, some people think that, like I said, Semites coming from Arabia, their phenotype would be a brown Mediterranean or a brown your African. Here's a book that actually goes into that by Henry Fields. It says physical anthropologists are certain that Mesopotamia was the eastern borderline for Semitic types of individuals, and that the Semites, whom we know as the brown Mediterranean peoples who invaded Mesopotamia from Arabia. And so let's actually get into what is a brown Mediterranean. So, particularly when we note once more that Mediterranean is not a synonym for white. Elliot Smith's brown or Mediterranean race being nearer the mark, Elliot Smith classes these Proto-Egyptians as a branch of what he calls the brown race, which is the same as Sergei's Mediterranean or Eurafrican race. The term brown is in this context refers to skin color and is simply a euphemism for Negro. And so here's actually an excerpt from the book dealing with that. It says the Mediterranean race was first defined by Sergi, who calls it Eurafrican. The Mediterranean race originated in Africa and is closely related to the Negro, both being long-skulled peoples descended from a common stock, the Eurafrican. So, therefore, if Semites do come from Arabia, and if Semites are brown Mediterranean or brown Near-African, then phenotypically wise, they would have sort of looked, Negroid. It has been believed, by the way, that ancient populations of Arabia was Proto-Negroid. For instance, the book The Arabs by Bertrand Thomas actually goes into this. He says, the original inhabitants of Arabia then, according to Sir Arthur Keith, one of the world's greatest living anthropologists, who has made a study of the Arab skeletal remains, ancient and modern, were not the familiar Arabs of our own time, but a very much darker people. A proto-Negroid belt of mankind stretched across the ancient world from Africa to Malaysia, giving rise to the Hamitic peoples of Africa, to the Dravidian peoples of India, and to an intermediate dark people inhabiting the Arabian Peninsula. So here's another book called The Negro in the New World that goes into the same thing. It says, it is quite convincible that the great peninsula of Arabia was once populated as far as its natural conditions allowed by a primitive Negroid stock or Negro stock. So there is thoughts that ancient Arabia did have skeletons that were quite Negroid. So genetically speaking, this does seem to be the case. As I said before, how he's saying that there was a primitive Negro stock in Arabia, genetics seems to imply this because, as we just said, these sub-Saharan African lineages in Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, seem to indicate a prehistoric entrance of a noticeable portion of these lineages that participated in the building of the primitive Arabian population. The presence of two underived E-M 96 Saudi lineages raises interesting questions related to the microhaplogroup DE-YAP phylogeography. And by the way, E-M 96, which was found in some Saudi lineages, is one of the oldest form of E, or the earliest forms. So therefore, the proto Ethiopic phenotype would probably be the best fit for these early Semites originating in the Arabian Peninsula. Again, I think this is the best only because they resemble the early out of Africa types, as said right here. So I think going with this phenotype will be decent. So the ancestors of the Israelites, Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. And if they did originate from the Arabian Peninsula, then they would have likely carried haplogroup E, and phenotypically they would have looked brown Mediterranean / brown Euro-African. Again, here's all the information put together. The linguists are the anthropologists that say Semites could have came from Arabia. Here's the phenotype, and then here is the genetics, the genetic papers that say E came from Arabia. So another theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is the Eastern Sahara, or the Nile Valley / Red Sea. So let's look into this origin. So we're going back to this book, why haplogroups, anthropological cultures, and language families, a review of the possibility of multidisciplinary comparisons using the case of E-M35 by Andrew Lensker. So it says there are several relatively uncontroversial proposals concerning the ancient movements of Afro-Asiatic languages, each of which we can immediately compare to haplogroup E-M35 and its subclades in population genetics. Both E-M35 male lineages on the one hand and Afro-Asiatic languages on the other are seen by specialists in the two respective fields as having moved prehistorically within what Curdy at 2007 referred to as the bi-directional corridor along the Nile and / the western coast of the Red Sea. From the Sinai and Mediterranean to the Horn of Africa. Also, in both fields, the population who lived in the corridor has obvious ancient connections to a Near Eastern Levantine corridor spreading into the Fertile Crescent, where such clades as E-V13 and E-M34 may have their origins. Middle Eastern Semitic-speaking populations typically also have a smaller presence of E-M35 Eurasian lineages than most African populations of Afro-Asiatic speakers, with the apparent exception of Chadic. There is also, in both cases, an obvious connection to the west of the Nile in the direction of the Sahara and along the southern Mediterranean in the Maghreb. The people there are strongly associated with the distinct E-M81 and E-V65 sublineages of E-M35 and the Berber branch of Afro-Asiatic languages. In both population genetics and linguists, the Levant branch re-entered Africa in historical periods, both in Egypt, which is now Arabic speaking, but was once home to the Egyptian language, and Ethiopia, where Semitic, South Semitic languages now dominate in some areas, which are believed to have once been Cushitic speaking. Indeed, there must have been much back and forth movements at these 2 points of contact between Africa and Asia. So basically, haplogroup E was going back and forth from the Middle East into Africa, spreading Afro-Asiatic tongue. Of course, when we find such similar patterns in both languages and Y lineages, this can give us at least some confidence that the same population movements caused both patterns. With this in mind, it is proposed that we may at least assume a strong likelihood that E-M35 male lineages were involved in at least many of the migrations and cultural transmissions which caused the present and historical distributions of the Afro-Asiatic languages. So basically, here is a visual representation of that. So basically, he's saying that the Afro-Sons or Proto-Afro-Asiatics would have emerged on the Eastern Sahara or in the Nile Valley. Here's a map of that. And here's the genetic map of that dealing with haplogroup E, the Afro-Asiatic homeland of Proto-Semitic languages. Again, this is likely the Eastern Sahara where they could have popped up in. Here's another paper dealing with that. It says, or here's a book dealing with that, In Hot Pursuit of Language in Prehistory by John D. Bingston. So it says, the overall pattern is consistent with a model of the first first speakers of Afro-Asiatic having emerged in or near the Horn of Africa, which we covered earlier, or the Nile Valley, which we're covering now. Early pre-Proto-Semitic speakers would have migrated into Syro-Palestine before the Neolithic, being taken by their M35 bearers, specifically M35/78, and adopted by populations bearing M8, 9 lineages. So again, here's a visual representation of that. Here is the origins of Afro-Asiatic along the Red Sea, or the Nile Valley, or the Eastern Sahara, however you want to say it. And then here is haplogroup E spreading again in that region of the Eastern Sahara, or the Red Sea, or the Nile Valley. So here's a paper dealing specifically with this. It's called Y chromosome E haplogroups, their distribution and implication to the origin of Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralism. So basically, it says most Y chromosome haplogroup diversity in Africa, however, is present within microhaplogroup E that seems to have appeared 21,000 through 32,000 YBP somewhere between the Red Sea and Lake Chad. The Proto-Afro-Asiatic group carrying the E-P2 mutation may have appeared at this point in time and subsequently gave rise to the different major population groups, including current speakers of Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralist populations. So here is P2, by the way, and here are all the people that descend from P2. So anyways, a branching in the network may once again represent an episode of human migration that carried the haplogroup E-M35 and its subgroups further to the western coast of the Red Sea, to Yemen, Oman, and Saudi Arabia, and concurrently down to southern Africa as part of a more recent Y chromosome motivated out of Africa migration episode. The PCA and MDS displayed similar interesting grouping of the Afar and Shio populations of Eritrea with their Near Eastern Arabian populations to conjure up on the genetic relationship of the two sides of the Red Sea, which is what we're covering now. The arrival of the E-M35 and the derived subclades, for example, E-M123/E-M34 to Arabia appears to be strongly linked to expansion into Eastern Africa, North Africa, Europe, Southern Africa, and even that is likely related to pastoralism, hesitant by the advent and the amendable for analysis and dating usually approaches similar to what was proposed for a co-migration of Y chromosome and disease traits. So basically what they're saying is that E could have popped up around the region of the Red Sea and spread from there, basically. Although most of the data sets in our study define the deep ancestry of the phylogeny, they still shed some information to our interpretation of recent phenomena, such as the current genetic diversity of E haplogroup and an implication to the origin and spread of Afro-Asiatic languages into the history of pastoralism. Moreover, more comparative genetic analysis between two sides of the Red Sea, especially emphasizing on E-M123/E-M34 or E-M78 haplogroups, would not refine the route of exit of Homo sapiens sapiens from East Africa, but also the genealogies of Afro-Asiatic languages in the region. So again, just showing you that map where early Afro-Asiatics could have came from, including Semitic people from Eastern Sahara or the Nile Valley or the Red Sea. And here is another paper dealing with that called The Complex Genetic History of East Africa Human Populations. And basically, they have right here marked B, And under the E section of B, they're basically saying that Proto-Semitic, right here it says B and E, Proto-Semitic, they put haplogroup E with the Proto-Semitic popping up around the Nile Valley, as we were saying, and going into the Middle East. So it's very interesting. So here again is a visual representation of that. And here is another source, a website that goes into that. The Red Sea origins and Neolithic expansion. It says haplogroup E1B1B, formerly known as E3B, represents the last major direct migration from Africa into Europe. E1B1B lineages are closely linked to the diffusion of Afro-Asiatic languages. So here is a visual representation of that. The Paleolithic Red Sea region, where haplogroup E would have popped up in. And here is a representation of the spread of those Proto-Afro-Asiatics from the Red Sea all across Africa and the Middle East, which will include the ancestors of Semites. And here's another representation of that, but this time using DNA haplogroups, the E marker specifically. PAA stands for Proto-Afro-Asiatic. All right, so yet again, we're met with the idea that haplogroup E is the lineage of early Afro-Asiatic and Semitic populations. But this time, the haplogroup would have originated near the Red Sea region of the Eastern Sahara. Now, how would these early Afro-Asiatic and Semites look? So I would say that they would look like a North Ethiopic type. So let's look at this type. What is the description of them? Common along the Red Sea coast and the Nile Valley, what we've been talking about, from Egypt to Eritrea and deep into the Ethiopian highlands. Often blends with Arabs and Yemenites that arrived in prehistoric times, sometimes in Arabia as well. And they tend to be dark, sometimes medium, brown skin, and tightly curly hair. So this is one representation of what Proto-Semites and Proto-Afro-Asiatics could have looked. I think that's a pretty good representation. So conclusion, the ancestors of the Israelites, again, Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged in the Eastern Sahara. Therefore, their genotype would likely have been haplogroup E, and their phenotype likely would have been Eastern Saharan. Here's all the information put together for this. We have the DNA of E being connected to the Red Sea and Afro-Asiatic. We have the phenotype right here, and we have the visual representation of this migration. So, another theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is North Africa, or, the Sahara / the Sahel. So let's look at the North African origins of Afro-Asiatic. The Semitic family is a member of the larger Afro-Asiatic family, all of whose other 5 or more branches have their origin in North Africa or the Maghreb. Largely for this reason, the ancestors of Proto-Semitic speakers were originally believed by some to have first arrived in the Middle East from North Africa, possibly as part of the operation of the Saharan pump around the late Neolithic. Here's a visual representation of Proto-Afro-Asiatics, including Proto-Semites coming out of Africa from North Africa when the Sahara was green. So let's look at the green Saharan pump theory. It's a hypothesis that explains how fauna and flora migrated between Eurasia and Africa via the land bridge in the Levant region. It posits that extended periods and abundant rainfall lasting many thousands of years in Africa are associated with the wet green Sahara phase, during which larger lakes and more rivers existed. So at one point in North Africa, there was lakes and rivers, larger rivers, flowing throughout the northern part of Africa, which is interesting. And we even see cave art of animals like giraffes, if you can see this, and elephants existing dead center in North Africa. So it's very interesting. The whole continent was once fertile. And this kind of fits with DNA. So let's look into that. So Rickett at 2008 study associated the sub-Saharan influences detected in the Natufian samples with the migration of E1b1b lineages from North Africa to the Levant and then into Europe, kind of like what we've been talking about. Recently, it has been posited that E3b originated in sub-Saharan Africa and expanded into the Near East and North Africa at the end of the Paleocene. A Mesolithic population carrying group 3 lineages with the M35/M215 mutation expanded northwards from sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa and the Levant. Here is that representation of that. So here is another study or book dealing with the origins of Afro-Asiatic. It's called the Afro-Asiatic Language Phylum, African in origin or Asian. And it says Greenberg in 1971. Note that 4 of the 5 members of his Afro-Asiatic language phylum are located on the African continent and only 1 mainly in Southwestern Asia. Therefore, he saw the mother language from which they descended as being in northeastern Africa. It's basically saying Afro-Asiatic popped up in northeastern Africa. Now, here's a book, a really great book by E. Lipsky, talking about the origins of Semites on page 43. The book is called Semitic Languages, Outline of a Comparative Grammar. So it says Proto-Semitic, starting, by the way, in the yellow, it says, this implies that the speakers of Proto-Semitic were still dwelling in Africa in the 5th millennium BC in the Neolithic subplumule 5500 through 3500 BC, when the Sahara's climate was much wetter, so that erosion took place, as in other moist temperates and subtropical regions, and there was a proper system of rivers and vegetation consisting of grass with trees. The worsening of environmental conditions is indicated in North Africa, 3500 BC. This disappearance of vegetation, a major funnel break, desertification, and desertion, this might have been the period when the speakers of Proto-Afro-Asiatic passed through the Nile Delta from the west to the east and reached Western Asia, where written documents of the 3rd millennium BC preserve noticeable traces of pre-Semitic, and in Mesopotamia, also the pre-Sumerian substream. Thus, from North Africa, wave after wave of Semitic migrations would seem to have set forth. The earliest of these migrants and those who went furthest east were the Akkadians, who journeyed along the Fertile Crescent through Palestine and Syria, and crossing over into Mesopotamia, reached northern Babylon in 3000 BC and founded the first Semitic empire at Kish. The southern Semites would have seemed to have reached the moisture highlands of Yemen and the Hadranite after 2000 BC, following the collapse of the early bronze culture in Palestine, while the Ethiopians would have crossed over to the Horn of Africa when drier conditions prevailed in southern Arabia in 15,000 through 500 BC. So I'm going to go to the next one. So here's again a visual representation of that. The Sahara was once green, and Proto-Afro-Asiatics would have been coming out of Africa, specifically Proto-Semites, and going into the Middle East. So here again is another paper from Science Magazine called The Origins of Afro-Asiatic by Christopher Ehret and S.O.Y. Cato, and Paul Newman and Peter Bellwood, basically talking about the origins of Afro-Asiatics in Africa. specifically North Africa, but also other parts. So it says this extensive, well-grounded linguistic research places the Afro-Asiatic homeland in the southeastern Sahara, which is what we're talking about, or adjacent Horn of Africa, which we discussed as well. And when all the Afro-Asiatic branches are included, strongly indicate a pre-food producing Proto-Afro-Asiatic economy. A careful reading of Dinkoff shows his continuing adherence to his long-held position of an exclusively African origin for the family. He explicitly describes Proto-Afro-Asiatic vocabulary as consistent with non-food producing vocabulary and links it to the pre-Neolithic Neolithic cultures in the Levant and in Africa south of Egypt, noting the latter to be older. Dinkoff does revise his location for the common Semitic homeland, moving it from entirely within Northeast Africa to areas straddling the Nile Delta and Sinai, but continues to place the origins of the family of the five other branches of the Afro-Asiatic language family wholly in Africa. One interpretation of the archaeological data supports a pre-food producing population movement from Africa into the Levant, consistent with the linguistic argument for a pre-Neolithic migration of pre-Proto-Semitic speakers out of Africa via Sinai. Furthermore, the archaeology of northern Africa does not support the endemic diffusion of farming populations from the Near East. From this continuity, it has been argued that the pre-food production Caspian peoples spoke languages ancestral to Berber and Chadic languages of Afro-Asiatic, placing the Proto-Afro-Asiatic period distinctively before 10,000 years ago. Furthermore, there is evidence that cattle domestication occurred independently in the early Heliocene Eastern Sahara earlier than in the Near East, casting doubt on the idea of a single origin of food production in the Levant. A critical reading of genetic data analysis, specifically those of Y chromosome phylogeography and the TAQI 49AF haplotypes, supports a hypothesis of population movement from the Horn or southeastern Sahara northward to the Nile Valley, northwest Africa, the Levant, and the Aegean. The geography of M35/215 lineage, which is of Horn/East African origin, is largely coordinated with the range of Afro-Asiatic languages. Underhill at state that this lineage was carried from Africa during the Mesolithic. The distribution of the Afro-Asiatic branch and this lineage can be best explained by invoking movement that originated in Africa and occurred before the emergence of food production as well as after. So basically, he's saying that Afro-Asiatic would have popped up somewhere in Africa, and E would have also spread Proto-Afro-Asiatic. And here's a good visual representation of that. So here is a paper that will actually deal with this a little bit deeper. It's called the phylogeography of Y chromosome binary haplotypes and the origins of modern human populations. Here are all the authors. So it says the expansion of Neolithic farmers from the Middle East into Europe is also represented in the NRY data, although suggesting a relatively localized area of impact. As mentioned before, in relation to Africa NRY history, a Mesolithic population carrying group 3 lineages with the M35/M215 mutation expanded northwards from sub-Saharan to North Africa and the Levant. The Levantine population of farmers that dispersed into Europe during and after the Neolithics carried these African group 3 M35/M215 lineages. Group 3 lineages are found at high. By the way, when they say group 3, they're talking about haplogroup E. So group 3 lineages are found at high frequencies in Africa and relatively high frequencies in the Middle East and Southern Europe, characterized by the M35/M215 mutations, with occasional occurrences in Central Asia, Pakistan, and America. Most notably, the PN2 transition unites two high frequency subclades defined by M2 slash PN1 slash M18 mutations in sub-Saharan Africa and M35 slash M215 in North and East Africa and the Mediterranean basin in Europe. We suggest that a population with this subclade of the African YAP slash M145 slash M203 slash PN2 cluster expanded into the southern and eastern Mediterranean at the end of the Paleocene. These lineages would have been introduced then from the Middle East into southern Europe and to a lesser extent northern India and Pakistan by farmers during the Neolithic expansion. So, overall, again, we see that haplogroup E is the best candidate for the lineage of early Afro-Asiatic and Semitic populations. One of the top three beliefs for the origins of Afro-Asiatic, including Semites, is that they emerged from North Africa and haplogroup E, and carried haplogroup E. Now, how would these early Afro-Asiatics and Semites look? So this is a good representation of how these early Afro-Asiatics and Proto-Semites would have looked. I think they would have had a Saharan Ethiopid phenotype. So let's look at the description. The Ethiopid type that was more common during the Neolithic, again, this is what we're dealing with, the Neolithic time period. So common during the Neolithic when the Sahara was green. And again, this is when those papers were talking about how these early Semites would have came out of the green, wet Saharan period of the Neolithic. And this is what they likely could look like. The description: reddish brown to black skin, tightly curly hair, and dolichocephalic and mesophalic phenotype or skull type. Sorry. So this is what early Proto-Semites and Proto-Afro-Asiatics could have looked. So let's go. Oh, yeah, here's another one as well. It could have also had a Western Ethiopid phenotype. So Ethiopid subtype that was more widespread across the Western Sahara regions during the Neolithic when the area was still a green savanna. This type tends to look reddish medium to dark brown skin, wavy to tightly curly hair, dolichocephalic, pseudo-Semitic features may appear in some individuals, somewhat permathenous. So this is another phenotype of how they could have looked. So there's always been a notion that Semites originated from Africa and that they were an African people. This has been known for quite a while. Here's a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. He says, however, Greenberg determined that Semitic languages really form only one of six or more branches from a much larger family, a larger language family, Afro-Asiatic. Even the Semitic subfamily itself is mainly African, 12 of its 19 surviving languages being confined to Ethiopia. This suggests that Afro-Asiatic languages arose in Africa and that only one branch of them spread to the Near East. Hence, it may have been Africa that gave birth to the languages spoken by the authors of the Old and New Testaments and the Quran, the moral pillars of Western civilization. Here is another paper dealing with Semites coming from Africa. This is a conversation with Christopher Ehret. He says, after all, the early Semites were just a few Africans arriving to find a lot of other people already in the area. So that's powerful. So the ancestors of the Israelites, again, a Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged in North Africa. The genotype of these people would have been haplogroup E, and the phenotype would have been Neolithic North African, aka Saharan Ethiopid. And here's all the information put together. The origins of E and Afro-Asiatic in North Africa, the spread. Here's a visual representation of the spread in the DNA, and here's what they would look like, all in one photo. So the final theory, we're almost done. The final theory for the origin of Semites in Afro-Asiatic is actually in the Levant and Israel. So let's look at the Levant origins of Afro-Asiatic. So if Divine Prospects there, I'm going to let them read this page. I'll get a sip of water. All right, it's all good. I got it. So this is a book called The Origins of Seminones by it's actually in that's a German name. I'm not going to try to pronounce the German name, but just going to read what it has. In order to reconstruct in our imagination the remote past of humans, scholars study first of all material reminders of previous times, human bones, tools, paintings, etc. These studies have advanced dramatically over recent years, both thanks to new findings and the new interpretation of old findings. Only a few scholars know, though, that in many cases, linguists and not anthropologists and archaeologists were the first who came to correct conclusions on the basis of linguistic reconstructions. Their conclusions were confirmed by archaeologists somewhat later and quite independently. Such was the conclusion that Near Eastern cultures of the Levant type were much older and much more developed than previously thought. Linguists not only reconstructed the lexicon of Natufians, which contains words designating some very sophisticated tools and processes, possesses, they also date it by the 12th millennium before present, BP, that they show that the Natufians spoke the Afro-Asiatic language just before the Afro-Asiatic language, just before the language started to disgenerate into the sister languages, Semitic, Cushitic, and Chadic. So here's the area, the homeland of of Natufians, the Natufian culture, and over here is the photo of the Proto-Afro-Asiatics. So, so here's a book dealing with this. It says, given the modern distribution of Semitic languages over the area in question, which belonged to the earlier Afro-Asiatic family, it seems appropriate to suggest that these first farmers of the Levant and their Mesolithic predecessors, including the Natufian culture, were speaking a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. It may be that Proto-Semitic continued to develop within the Levant and Syria area, since both Ebelite and Akkadian, early Semitic languages, are there attested early and form around 2400 BC. Again, here is the Natufian culture region, and here's the Levant. When they say the Levant, they're talking about Israel, Jordan, and Syria. So the Afro-Asiatic, this language family consists of 6 branches, 5 including ancient Egyptian confined to North Africa, 1 Semitic also extending in ancient times to Southwest Asia. That distribution suggests an African origin for the family, whose Semitic branch might have spread into Southwest Asia. But the overwhelmingly archaeological attest flow of domesticated crops and animals from the Neolithic times onward into Egypt and through the Arabian Peninsula into Ethiopia is out of Southwest Asia rather than out of Africa. That would make it surprising for Semitic languages to have spread against that stream. There are two principal competing hypotheses for the origin of Afro-Asiatic. One based on reconstruction of the early vocabulary for cultural and environmental refinements, places the homeland in the Levant during the earliest Neolithic, the late Natufian culture, 9,500 BC, with a subsequent to prolonged spread by 5,000 BC that is well documented. Archaeological mixed farming across the Nile into Egypt and North Africa, giving rise to the Egyptian Berber branches of Afro-Asiatic languages, and sheep and goat based pastoralism from Western Arabia across the Red Sea into Ethiopia and Sudan, giving rise to the Cushitic, Omotic, and Chadic branches. Semitic spread into Ethiopia much later. That southwestern Asian origin would now be masked by language replacement in the homeland, including the spread of the Semitic branch of Afro-Asiatic, including Akkadian or Babylonian, Aramaic, and Arabic in historic times. So here's that spread that they're talking about. This is actually a photo from the Science magazine talking about the farmers and their languages and first expansions by Jared Diamond and Peter Bellwood. And so it would spread from the Fertile Crescent into Africa. And here is the actual map of Afro-Asiatic, and again showing that spread. So here is a good paper from ResearchGate dealing with the Natufian origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatic. This article is called "The Prehistory of a Dispersal: The Proto-Afro-San or Proto-Afro-Asiatic Farming Lexicon" by Alexander Metolvi. He says, adduced below are more than 30 common Afro-San, Afro-Asiatic, Semito-Hamitic terms, most of which obviously relate to farming, while some may relate to either farming or the collecting of wild cereal and fruit. The northern branch of Afro-Sans, Egyptian, Semitic, Chadic, and Berber, and the southern branch, Cushitic and Omotic. The Proto-Afro-San speakers can be identified with high probability with the creators of the Natufian and post-Natufian early Neolithic archaeological culture of the Levant. The identification of Proto-Afro-Sans as Natufians and post-Natufians seem to satisfy all four criteria. Besides the farming lexicon, there are sets of reconstructed Proto-Afro-San terms pointing to the inception animal breeding. Finally, the Levant appears to be an attested region from where population began to spread starting in the early Neolithic, covering not only wide tracts of Western Asia, but also adjacent parts of the Mediterranean and Africa. So what's interesting about this is that E is very much a part of this spread in the Levant. So this is a genetic paper dealing with that Y chromosome diversity characterizes the Gulf of Oman. It says the role of the Levant in the Neolithic dispersal of the E3B1-M35 sublineages is supported by the data. And remember, he was just talking about how, the spread of Proto-Afro-Sans from the Levant in the Neolithic. So here's a visual representation of that. Here's E-M35 spreading from the Levant into Arabia and into the Horn of Africa, into North Africa, and into Mesopotamia and into Europe. Here's all the dates. Basically, E-ZM827 will be in North Africa, Arabian Peninsula, the Fertile Crescent, East Africa, Anatolia, Europe, and Southeast Asia. E-M78, another example, will be seen in North Africa, East Africa, Europe, Arabian Peninsula, Anatolia, and the Fertile Crescent. And M35 in itself will be seen in the Mediterranean, Southwest Asian, and North African populations. So here is also the spread of Afro-Asiatics linguistically. And as you can see, when it comes to the spread of haplogroup E and the spread of Afro-Asiatic from the Levant, it kind of all fits the same migration patterns. And here's a visual representation of all of it put together. The area of the Natufian culture and where Afro-Asiatics would have popped up from, if Natufians are the ancestors of these guys. And here is the spread of haplogroup E, and here's the spread of the language family. So here's a good paper dealing with this. It's called The Genetic Linguistic Inference by Dr. Michael St. Clair. So it says the 2005 book First Farmers: The Origins of Agricultural Societies by Peter Bellwood provides an excellent resource for linguists who wish to explore the worldwide correlation between the origins of agriculture and the expansion of languages. Prior to the adoption of agriculture in Southwest Asia and elsewhere in the world, for that matter, the human tribes practiced hunter-gathering techniques in order to survive. The evolution of agricultural in Southwest Asia generally follows a series of cultural transitions that begin with the Natufians, followed by the pre-pottery Neolithic A and the pre-pottery Neolithic B, and then finally the development of pottery itself. The Natufians stand as an important cultural transition because they were the last hunter-gatherers in the Middle East. The Natufians appear near the Sea of Galilee in what is now present-day Israel. Afro-Asiatic language family consists of 376 languages. These language families are distributed throughout the Middle East, as well as in North Africa, East Africa, and in West Central Africa. Afro-Asiatic is subdivided into 6 main branches: Egyptian, Semitic, Chadic, Cushitic, Omotic, and Berber. Long-standing opinion among linguists, such as Christopher Eretz in 2004, places the prehistoric origins of Afro-Asiatic somewhere in East Africa. Interestingly, linguistic data may also support this model of Afro-Asiatic origins. Using linguistic reconstruction, Matolvia 2002 presents a Proto-Afro-Asiatic lexicon of farming techniques based on the reconstructions he suggests that the Natufians' agriculture and Afro-Asiatic co-evolved in Southwest Asia. Let me read that again. He based his reconstructions. He suggested that the Natufians' agriculture and Afro-Asiatic co-evolved in Southwest Asia. Finally, another reason for identifying Southwest Asia as a plenitive homeland of Afro-Asiatic languages is the Y chromosome data, as presented below in section 4 and 5. So focusing on the green cluster reflects that mutation within this cluster are variants of the E-Z827 haplogroup. By the way, I'm just going to quickly go over to where I showed that. Remember, E-Z827 is seen in North Africa, Raven Peninsula, Fertile Crescent, East Africa, Anatolia, Europe, and Southwest Asia. So going back to what this was saying. So it says an interesting study from 2016, Lizards was able to extract 3 ancient DNA samples from a Natufian archaeological site in Israel. As the reader may recall from section 2, the Natufians were the last hunter-gatherers in Southwest Asia. 2 of the samples belong to E-PF1961, which is an ancestral marker for E-M34. The E-M34 mutation has a wide distribution currently found in populations of the Mediterranean, Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. For linguists, the E-M34 mutation is significant as it represents a potential back to Africa marker that co-expanded from Southwest Asia into East Africa with goat and sheep herders about 6,000 years ago. This Neolithic migration, as the reader may recall from section 3, appears to have carried Afro-Asiatic languages from Southwest Asia to East and North Africa. The ancient Natufian Y chromosome data, as presented supports this position because the E-PF1961 mutation is an upstream marker from E-M34. Thus, E-M34 probably evolved in the Middle East. Additional analysis of contemporary genetic data also supports Middle Eastern and agricultural origins of Afro-Asiatic languages in East Africa. Krugurni, a 2004 study, suggests that E-M34 arose in the Levant based on their interpretation of the data and wider distribution of this marker outside of Africa. Additional Cadis at 2008 data, the E-M123 mutation in the Middle East is about 11,000 years old, which potentially places the evolution of the downstream E-M34 mutation during the Southwest Asian Neolithic. So now let's visualize the migration of Afro-Asiatics from the Levant. Also, let's visualize the migrations of haplogroup E from the Levant. Well, actually, I would have had a video in this part, but I'm actually not going to play the video because Divine will have to change to his screen to find the video on YouTube, because there is a video showing that migration. But we can just skip that for now, and another time I can probably show you all that. But anyways, basically, it's believed that Semites specifically descend from Natufians. If y'all didn't know that, there are papers that say that Semites their ancestors would be the Natufians. From the book In Hot Pursuit of Language in Prehistory, it says this paper makes an additional inference, since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. So the Natufians are the ancestors of Semites. It's very interesting. Neolithic Levantines, the ancestors of Proto-Semites, they only had haplogroup E. It says craniometric analysis have suggested an affinity between the Natufians and populations of North or Sub-Saharan Africa. A result that finds some support from Y chromosome analysis, which shows that the Natufians and successor Levantine Neolithic populations carried haplogroup E of likely ultimate African origin, which has not been detected in other ancient males from West Asia. Here's a paper dealing with that as well. Ancient DNA from Chalcolithic Israel, Chalcolithic mean Copper Age, reveals the role of population mixture in cultural transformation. So it says this finding constrasts with both earlier Neolithic and Epipaleolithic Levantine populations, which were dominated by haplogroup E. So Neolithic Levantine populations were dominated by the E marker. The latest study on the origins of the Semitic language has its birthplace actually in the Levant, which of course is where the descendants of the Natufians are. So it says such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. So here's the paper dealing with the origins of Semitic, Proto-Semitic. The Bayesian phylogenetic analysis of Semitic languages identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East. So it reads, the evolution of languages provides a unique opportunity to study human population history. The origin of Semitic and the nature of dispersals by Semitic-speaking populations are of great importance to our understanding of the ancient history of the Middle East and the Horn of Africa. Our statistical tests of alternative Semitic histories support an additional divergence of Akkadian from ancestral Semitic over competing hypotheses, i.e., an African origin of Semitic, what we've been covering this whole time. We estimate an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic approximately 5,700 50 years ago in the Levant. The further proposed that a contemporary Ethio-Semitic languages of Africa reflect a single introduction of early Ethio-Semitic form, Southern Arabia, approximately 2,800 years ago. So, dealing with Semitic origins, our analysis of the Semitic language family produces a date of phylogeny that estimates the origin of Semitic at approximately 4,400 through 7,400 YBP. This indicates that the ancestor of all Semitic languages in our dataset was being spoken in the Near East no earlier than approximately 7,400 YBP, after having diverged from Afro-Asiatic in Africa. The discovery of such early Semitic languages could increase estimates of the age of Semitic and alter its geographical origin. In these early Semitic languages All right, let me repeat that again. Got to read that slower because it's big. And alter its geographical origin if these early Semitic languages were found in Africa rather than the Middle East. So let's keep going. Here is a map from this study showing that. So it says map of Semitic languages and inferred dispersals. So it says the map also presents the dispersal of Semitic languages inferred from our study and origin of Afro-Asiatic along the African coast of the Red Sea, supported by comparative analysis, is indicated in red. Although other African origins of Afro-Asiatic have been proposed, Southwest Ethiopia as an example, the assumed location of the divergence of ancestral Semitic from Afro-Asiatic within the African Red Sea and the Near East is indicated in italics. So basically, here's the origin of Afro-Asiatic, and they have the ancestral Semitic where they said, near the Red Sea, and then you have the dispersal of Semitic in the Levant. So there you go with that. And so our estimates for the origin of Semitic, which was 4,400 through 7,400 YBP, predates the first Akkadian inscriptions in the archaeological record of northern Mesopotamia by approximately 100 through 3,000 years. The city-states of Sumer were established and flourishing in Mesopotamia with their own indigenous languages unrelated to Semitic by approximately 5,400 YBP. So it is unlikely that Akkadian was spoken in Sumer for the entirety of the possible 3,000-year interval between the origin of Semitic and Akkadian's initial appearance in the archaeological record. The presence of ancient members of the two oldest Semitic groups, East and West Semitic, in the same region of the Levant, combined with the possible long interval of 100 through 3,000 years between the origin of Semitic and the appearance of Akkadian in Sumer, suggests a Semitic origin in the northeast Levant and later movement of Akkadian eastward into Mesopotamia and Sumer. We use the Bayesian phylogenetic model to elucidate the relationships and divergence dates of Semitic languages, which we then related to the epigraphic and archaeological records to produce a comprehensive hypothesis of Semitic origins and dispersals after the divergence of ancestral Semitic from Afro-Asiatic in Africa. Now keep this part in mind. We estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, 5,750 YBP in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. What's interesting about this model for the spread of Proto-Semitic languages is that it fits the spread of haplogroup E. Again, It's spreading from the Levant in the early Bronze Age. And here's actually a really good representation of both maps. Here's the spread of haplogroup E, and here's the spread of Proto-Semitic. So that's actually a really good representation. But now, ironically, or perhaps unironically, it is believed that Proto-Semites had haplogroup E and spread it particularly from the Levant. Here is a website that goes into this. It says E-M123 originated some 19,000 years ago during the last ice age. Its place of origin is uncertain, but it was probably in the Red Sea region, somewhere between the southern Levant and Ethiopia. Its main subclade, E-M34, most probably emerged in the Levant about 15,000 years ago. Soon afterwards, M34 split into two branches, M84 and Z841, which were probably found in the Fertile Crescent during the Neolithic. Here's the Fertile Crescent, by the way. The cradle of civilization. This is where E was. E-M34 lineages experienced a much more dramatic expansion during the Chalcolithic Copper Age period. Also, downstream of ECTS1096 and Y14891 and Z21018 clades are typically found among people of Jewish ancestry, while PF6391 and Z21421 are found in the Levant, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and the Arabian Peninsula. F1382 appears to have expanded during the Iron Age from the Levant to the Arabian Peninsula, where it is exclusively found today. So here's the spread of haplogroup E. Again, we're dealing with E-M35 in the Levant, and then you see it's spreading. It goes, I guess you can say, in between the Levant and Mesopotamia. You find these are samples we found, by the way. And here are the people who descend from these samples. E-Z81841 that we just talked about. And then we see it going from the Levant into Mesopotamia. Here are the people that typically have these markers. And we see here more samples of E in the Mesopotamia. And so here's a good visual representation of the samples we find. And basically we see E expanding from the Levant as the samples are oldest here, but are youngest out here. So haplogroup E is the best candidate for the lineage of early Afro-Asiatic and Semitic populations. One of the top three beliefs for the origins of Afro-Asiatic, including Semites, is that they emerged from the Levant and carried haplogroup E. Now, how would these Natufians, the ancestors of Semites, looked? Here's a good paper dealing with that. It says, it is a further surprise that the Epipaleolithic Natufian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to arise, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa. Interestingly enough, however, a small Natufian sample falls between the Niger-Congo group and the other samples used. This placement suggests that there may have been a sub-Saharan African element in the makeup of the Natufians. As shown in Figure 1, the Somalis, the Egyptian Bronze Age samples from Naquata, may have a hint of a sub-Saharan African component. Next, the Congo, Dahomey, and Hemnia samples were run as Niger-Congo twang. Then, Naquata Bronze Age Egyptian, the Nubian Bronze Age, Israeli Falahim Arabic farmers, and Somali samples were lumped as prehistoric / recent Northeast Africa. So basically, here is the Niger-Congo, here's the Natufian. They have like a common link. And here is Natufian, in between phenotypically a Niger-Congo person and a Northeast Africa person. Phenotypically, they're kind of in between that. So the Niger-Congo speakers, Congo, Dahomey, Hemnia, cluster closely with each other and a bit less closely with the Nubian sample. both the recent and the Bronze Age Nubians, and more remotely with the Naqada Bronze Age sample of Egypt, the modern Somali, and the Arab-speaking Falahim farmers of Israel. When those samples were separated and ran in a single analysis as figure 1, there is a there there sorry there clearly is a tie between them that is diluted the further one gets from sub-Saharan Africa. So conclusion, if the late Paleocene Natufian sample from Israel is the source from which that Neolithic spread was derived, then there was clearly a sub-Saharan African element present of almost equal importance to the late prehistoric Eurasian element. So here is a reconstruction of a Natufian from Jericho. And the phenotype is very interesting. If you ask me, this phenotype kind of looks like common. If you ask me, that's just my opinion. But the ancestors of the Israelites, again, a Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged from the Levantine Natufians. Therefore, their Y DNA would be haplogroup E. Phenotypically, they would have looked Natufian. Here's all the information put together. Early Proto-Semites being E markers. Here's the Natufian region in the Levant. Here's the spread of Semitic in the Levant and the spread of haplogroup E from the Levant. And this is what a Natufian will look like. So, putting everything together, what are the locations for the origins of Afro-Asiatic? The Horn of Africa, Yemen, the Arabian Peninsula, Eastern Sahara, Nile Valley, Red Sea, North Africa, Sahara/Sahel, Levantine Natufians. These are the general homelands for the origins of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic people. Basically, the origins of Afro-Asiatic and the origins of haplogroup E overlap. From everything we read so far, whenever we talk about the origins of Afro-Asiatic, haplogroup E isn't far behind because the first Proto-Afro-Asiatic speakers likely were E markers. And it doesn't matter where you want to put the boat. People tend to say E originated in Ethiopia or in the Middle East or in North Africa, whatever. Doesn't matter where you put it, Afro-Asiatic is not far behind, and they overlap each other almost all the time. Horn of Africa, Yemen, Eastern Sahara, Arabia, North Africa/Northeast Africa, Levant. All one and the same. Afro-Asiatics equal haplogroup E. It's been established by most linguists and geneticists that haplogroup E males were the originators of the Afro-Asiatic languages, which would include Semitic. Again, E1B1B lineages are closely linked to the diffusion of Afro-Asiatic languages. Most of the Afro-Asiatic speakers share a lineage defined by Yap descendant called PN2 215 M35. Here's another paper. The Proto-Afro-Asiatic group carrying the E-P2 mutation may have appeared at this point in time and subsequently gave rise to the different major population groups, including current speakers of the Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralist populations. So, if you look at a map of Afro-Asiatic languages and a map of haplogroup E, both Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup E overlap one another. So here's a map of Afro-Asiatic, just to remind you. And here's a map of haplogroup E. If you put them together, they perfectly overlap one another, almost hauntingly. And Christopher Ehret, as well as Cato, do put haplogroup E and Afro-Asiatic together as one and the same. They think it's not a coincidence that the distribution overlaps, which I agree. So Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup E hauntingly overlaps one another. It's not shocking why most scholars would agree haplogroup E men were the first Afro-Asiatic speakers and spread both their language and Y-DNA. Haplogroup E is seen in some of the oldest Afro-Asiatic speaking regions. Not only do we find old samples of E in Afro-Asiatic territory, but to this day, we still find haplogroup E dominating these regions. Here are some of the oldest samples we find of E. For instance, we find E-M81 in Morocco, E-Z830 in Israel, E-M35 in the Jordan, E-M78 in Morocco and in the Jordan, E-V22 in Egypt, E-L618 in I think this is in Southern Europe, and EV13 in Thracia in the Balkans. And also here's the maps as well. And here's another good map showing the languages and the haplogroup basically overlapping with one another. So Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup E also fit well with the migration of both the language and the haplogroup, as well as pastoralism from the Levant. Again, just showing you if they come from the Levant, they overlap as well. Perfectly overlap one another. So with that being said, we basically see that Afro-Asiatic and haplogroup E overlap, and I agree with linguists and geneticists that haplogroup E is the founder of Afro-Asiatic and Proto-Semitic. And again, here is the languages of the early Afro-Sans, and here is haplogroup E, seen perfectly within one another. And everything basically overlaps one another. If we were to put all the papers together, we kind of see this harmony. So generally, it's believed the origins of Afro-Asiatic is either in the Horn of Africa, Eastern Sahara, North Africa, or Levantine Natufians. Now, this is the general regions. We're excluding the Yemeni and the Arabian. This is the general regions, these four regions. Again, I'm going to read this. The Semitic family is a member of, and by the way, each line represents something. So the Semitic family is the member of the larger Afro-Asiatic family, all of whose other 5 or more branches have their origin in North Africa or the Maghreb. Largely for this reason, the ancestors of Proto-Semitic speakers were originally believed by some to have arrived first in the Middle East from North Africa, possibly as part of operation of the Saharan pump around the late Neolithic. So this red underline means that Semites would originate from North Africa. Now let's read the green. It says Dinkoff sees Semitic originating between the Nile Delta and Canaan as the northernmost part of Afro-Asiatic. So basically, he says that the Semitic people could have originated around the the Nile River and the Canaan land. And this is in green. So in blue, Bench says Bench even wonders whether the highly divergent Greg languages indicate an origin in Ethiopia, with the rest of the Ethiopic Semitic a later back migration. So in blue, Bench believes that Semites could have originated in Ethiopia. We have it actually here, right here. And again, in yellow, according to Christy G. Turner II, there is anthropological and physical anthropological reason for a relationship between modern Semitic-speaking populations of the Levant and the Natufian culture. And so, of course, this yellow is talking about Semites originating with the Natufians. So we have the Horn of Africa, the Eastern Sahara, or North Africa, and we have the Levant origin. These are the 4 basic, or 3 basic origins for Proto-Afro-Asiatic and for specifically Proto-Semites. And so this is the origins of Afro-Asiatic, and the reason why all this is important is because going all the way back, this is all. Let me just back out of that. This is all important because the origins of the Hebrew people are from Semitic populations, are from Proto-Semitic people, because we know according to their genealogy, they descend from Shem. So all this is quite important for us to know about the origins of Proto-Semites from an academic standpoint. So we have made it to the end of the presentation. If Divine doesn't mind, I can do a Q&A and answer some questions, but if it is too late, then we can just end it here. It's up to him. It's up to the host, because I'm just a guest. But I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all understood what I was trying to convey. But I am done.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. All right, so thank you for that presentation, the Hebrew of Israel, aka Ivri. Appreciate that, my brother. A lot of extensive, comprehensive information in regards to the establishment of the Proto-Afro-Asiatic clade of people and their lineage, as far as the provenance of it, and where it's circulating at today, and how establishing the E haplogroup in relation to Israel is prominent and important in designating who is Israel today. So I appreciate that. So several questions have come up since you was doing your presentation. Let me see.
I might need to grab my charger for my computer. It's at 20%.
Okay, yeah, take your time. Go ahead and grab it, and then I'll give you the couple of questions that did come up. So we'll just wait a moment for him to return. And thank y'all for staying up with us late on this Monday morning. We appreciate that.
I'm about to go get. I need to get something to wipe this water off the table. But I'm about to get my charger. It's at the other end of the house.
No problem. All right, so we're just gonna wait a moment.
Okay, I'm back. I'm just gonna plug it up.
All right.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started with the questions. Let me see what we had from here. Let's see. Okay, here's a question here. I don't know if you can see the screen. Can you see that?
Yes. Doesn't this go against the Bible? Semitic is a young language, according to this.
Yeah, according to your presentation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, according to the scriptures, they don't really say how young the Semitic language is, but basically, I guess you're sort of asking like an age of the earth question. I'm assuming. There are two different consensus for the age of the earth. I'm assuming this is what you're asking. There's an old.
I don't think they're referring to that. I'm thinking they're referring to by the way that you're establishing the origin of the Semitic language family, right, or the Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. It seems to be a much younger or later language as opposed to other languages that existed during that time.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Well, depending on what model you use, you can actually put Semitic right along with the origins of all the rest of the Proto-Afro-Asiatic languages, if you want. Like if you were to go with the Natufian model, which literally says that Natufians are the ancestors of Semites.
Okay, that was your answer to that, right?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, here's the next question.
So, what haplogroups are the Egyptians and Cushites input? Are they E along with the Shemites? I would say that the descendants of Ham would be haplogroup A and haplogroup B. And I can actually cover this in another presentation. I've done this in the past on the Shoop's channel. But the ancient Hamites, I guess you can call them, would be the A and B markers. And these would be non-Semitic speakers. These would be your Nilo-Saharan speakers, your Click languages, and your whatever language the Pygmies were speaking, those languages. I knew the speaker was E1B1B Natufian leaning, but the Sub-Saharan E1B1A dominated is now on more.
So they're saying that I know the speaker was E1B1B Natufian leaning, meaning that they knew that that's the angle that you was going or coming from, right? But they're saying, but were Sub-Saharan E1B1A dominated in regards to that region, So they're saying so now they're more confused.
Oh, I will actually touch on E1B1A in the future. Right now, for tonight's presentation, I'm only dealing with the origins of Afro-Asiatic, so I'm just going to read papers that specifically deal with those origins. But don't get me wrong, I will eventually get to E1B1A. So with this presentation, I'm trying to give an unbalanced account on who this ancient man Shem would have been and his descendants. So I'm not really getting into the whole Israel thing, you know, E1B1A being Israel or anything like that. I'm trying to give a neutral understanding when it comes to the origins of these people, the ancestors of Israel, these Proto-Afro-Asiatics and Proto-Semites.
Okay.
This guy is talking about MVP, not vain. They're brothers, but they both can be Israelites. Oh my God. Yeah, I'll get to the Israelite question another night. I will eventually get to the Israelites. Don't worry. Again, talking about E1B1A and E1B1B is very important. Again, specifically, we're dealing with the E-P2 marker, which is the ancestor, or should I say, the first people who would have spoke Proto-Afro-Asiatic, and E-P2 is, you know, both the father of E1B1A and E1B1B. But we'll get to the Israelites and E1B1A at a later date. I do not have E1B1B actually. I'm just going with what the academics say. Like, I'm not going to be biased or anything when it comes to the origins of Afro-Asiatic. You know, I'm just going to read what the papers say and follow that model of what the linguists have found and what the geneticists have found. From this information, you can identify Esau with his descendants today. I actually do have a theory on who the Edomites are based on Y-DNA, but I don't feel like covering it now. I feel like I should do a whole presentation on it. But I definitely have a strong theory on who Esau would be. He is talking about the ancestors of the Israelites. Correct, Shari. I am talking about the ancestors of the Israelites, not the Israelites themselves. That's correct. Basically, I'm solidifying the idea that the Israelites likely would be an E marker because of the fact we find E among Proto-Afro-Asiatics and Proto-Semites. This presentation is not about the Israelites. It's more so about the ancestors of the Israelites, the ancient ancestors before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are correct, Shari. Yes. Which came first, E1B1B or E1B1A? They are both brothers. Their father being E-P2. So they, sorry, man, sneezing. They both would have popped up around the same time. Sorry. It's dusty in this room, this office.
Take your time.
Oh, did she hear my question or did you hear
so
me?
you answered it? Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
all
right. Tower Bible flip the script throughout the region. I don't really quite I think that's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah, but it's also implying in regards to what you were saying as far as the language is connected to Afro-Asiatic, that the Tower of Babel incident would have disrupted that, because you did mention language and Semites from Shem, etc. Right? So they're just saying that the Tower of Babel incident in regards to Shemites and what they spoke in that region would have flipped the script or would have caused some kind of dispersal that would have interrupted and caused a schism in regards to that Afro-Asiatic language family, right? Because you did mention the origin of those peoples and how you identify those peoples being Semites is based on the language, right?
Okay, I see now. Yeah, that's why I subscribe. Well, actually, in my next presentation, I say what I subscribe to the most. But yeah, that is very true.
All right, and that's it. If anybody else has a question, still got about almost 80 people in the building. Please ask it now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, we will end it now. Also, oh, here it is.
I also have a YouTube channel I can show them. What? Oh, question. That was what is your conclusion? What is my conclusion to everything that I covered? That will actually be the next presentation. But basically, to sort of sum up without spoiling too much of the next one, the conclusion is that if the Israelites are descending from a man named Shem, ancestors of Semites, then it's likely that if we look into the origins of Afro-Asiatic from a academic standpoint, sorry, excuse me, from an academic standpoint, basically we see that the origins of the Israelites, or not the origins of the Israelites, the origins of their ancestors could have been either in Africa, nor the Horn of Africa, the North Africa, or in the Levant with the Natufians, and basically their male ancestors would have carried E markers, which is very important because our opposition goes for a different marker. I guess I'll just go ahead and say it. They go for the J marker, which really doesn't make sense when you look into these papers that talk about, Afro-Asiatics being E markers. So how is Israel going to be J? It doesn't make sense.
Gotcha.
Just one question. Is Esau also? Yes, the Edomites, the ancient Edomites, technically they would be classified as a Afro-Asiatic people, specifically under the Semitic branch. So yes, they are.
Okay.
Esau or the Edomites or the Idumeans, all one and the same. Yep.
Yeah. And Shari Anaya just agreed with that. So okay. So I think that's it. So we had almost 100 people watching. So thank y'all for staying up late or early in the morning and catching this. Those of you who are watching this on the replay, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and he will be looking at the comments and responding. Also, my brother, please give out any information where the people can reach you at, email or social media or YouTube, etc.
Yes, this is my YouTube channel right here. It is called The Hebrew of Israel. It's on the screen. And recently I posted 2 videos. I'm sharing. I recently posted 2 videos. Oops. This is, it's literally the same name that I have, the Hebrew of Israel. I have 2 videos so far. Welcome to my channel, and what are haplogroups and what is DNA, going into that. And I will be posting again Friday, hopefully. I'm going to try to post these videos every Friday, try to have a schedule. And yeah, I have other social medias, but I'm not going to go over them all. But if y'all want to talk to me tonight, I will be on Clubhouse under the same name, the Hebrew of Israel. Maybe you'll find me on there. I think I'll open up a room for a few minutes for more questions, because we don't want to keep this video too long-winded. But yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed and understood my presentation, and I'm glad to be here to disseminate the information. If all haplogroups made it from A and N, then would A and B? I think you meant to say A and B, I'm assuming. And then wouldn't A and B be endemic? Yeah, so there's actually different models for the origins of these haplogroups. One very interesting model is from Dr. Nathaniel Jansen, and he posits that all these haplogroups, they don't come from haplogroup A, but rather they come from 3 ancient ancestral nodes that dispersed all these different haplogroups. And these 3 nodes would be 3 men. And I believe this sort of could represent the 3 sons of Noah. So when you get a chance, look up Nathaniel Jensen's model, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen's model on the origins of haplogroups, because there are other theories as to how they could have popped up other than all descending from A. It's very interesting.
Okay. All right, and I shared your channel in the chat for anybody interested. So that's about it. So y'all go over and subscribe to the brother's channel. It's called the Hebrew of Israel. How can they contact you via email?
Oh yes, you can put my email in the chat as well, and or I can. Let me see. How do let me switch back to the live stream. Oh wait, you already did it.
Let me know.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Yeah, you beat me to it.
All right, so it's the Hebrew of Israel at gmail.com. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, especially for those who want to replay, or you can email him directly, the Hebrew of Israel at gmail.com. And then please go over to his channel. I left the link in the chat. If you can't find it doing a search, you can click on subscribe, hit the bell notification, and he will be updating it with new content soon. All right. Okay, so I think that concludes everything. So I appreciate you joining the channel, my brother. Thank you for all of that comprehensive information. I look forward to part 2. And then I look forward, after part 2, me and you doing our presentation together, which is going to be a 1-2 combo TKO in regards to who Israel is, leaving no stone left unturned. And, we're just going to just put this work in for the community, man. And do it at an academic level. It's time that we become catalysts for change, so that way the direction in which we debate, discuss, pose arguments, etc., has the credibility of scientific and academic methodology, and that it withstands peer review and scrutiny. You being a young man in college currently, know what that's like. And leaving from college, this is something that you will continue to engage in to sharpen your sword. So I thank God that he is raising up the youth to pick up this mantle and prove who we are through this means, instead of just arguing, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Some, Joe Blow off the internet, some random vlog or some meme or something like that. We're not doing that. This is 2021 going into 2022. It's a different level of Israelites that's out here, and we're prepared for whatever comes our way, and that's why I appreciate this young brother. Again, I've been following him for some time. He's been following me for some time. Recently, I've also been following him on Clubhouse. He's been in some sessions with me on Clubhouse, and especially one earlier yesterday, it was, and had some great builds, So if you're not on Clubhouse, please join Clubhouse ASAP. Join me and this brother on Clubhouse. And again, any additional questions you have, email it to the Hebrew of Israel at gmail.com, or leave them in the comments below. Or you can wait to our next presentation, which whenever we schedule the date and time, I'll go ahead and promote it, so you guys can make sure you're there. It'll be pretty much earlier than now, so we can get more people on the live. But then you can ask any follow questions there. And again, his conclusion outside of the literature review, and expound on our literature review, he is going to reserve for the next presentation. All right. All right. So I think that's about it. So thank y'all for joining and watching. Any last words, my brother, or are you good?
Just thank you for having me on the show. It was, it's an honor to be here, and can't wait to dish out more information to the people.
Awesome. Okay. And again, as a disclaimer, all the views expressed on this channel by this individual, my brother, the Hebrew of Israel, on this particular show, are those of his own. They don't necessarily express all the beliefs and subscriptions of Kingdom Harbinger Ministries and DivineProspect. I allowed the brother to have an opportunity to share the information that he has for the edification of our community. And like I said, a lot of things he say, I agree. And even if I disagree on anything, he's entitled to his position, because the brother is very thorough, well studied, and I appreciate and admire him, and I look forward to bringing him on again. All right. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoy. Peace and shalom.